Welcome to the wonderful world of wine. We are your hosts, Mark Lindsay and Kim Simone, exploring all things wine with you. You can find us on Facebook at The Wonderful World of Wine. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining Kim and I today on The Wonderful World of Wine. How are you, Kim?
Hey, Mark. I'm good. How are you?
Everything is great.
Wonderful.
Always excited to talk wine with our listeners and hear Kim and I fight about something this week, maybe. I don't know. It's always a good chance. Always a good chance. Anyway.
It's a healthy debate.
Yeah, well, good. Yeah, I like that, the way you said it. We have a few stories of things that have been floating around. People probably saw them in the news. There's been some studies that were done on wine, and we thought we'd talk about them today. And the first one is wine drinkers know less and they don't care. And this was a winesearcher.com report, Kim, that was a UK study. So what'd you think about this?
Yeah, we do get a lot of our study reports that we talk about. A lot of them really do come out of the UK. And it's so interesting that there is still this focus on England being the home of sort of wine appreciation, wine studies, sort of wine knowledge. So sort of fascinating that every once in a while we run into these articles that are either for the English market or have done studies of the English market. But the real, I think, point of this article was that there's a certain level of knowledge that wine drinkers have. And yes, the title of the article is that wine drinkers know less, but they did point out in this article that they only know marginally less than they did a couple of years ago. But I actually thought that the interesting point was where it spoke to people having to retain less information in their brains because they're keeping all of their info on their smartphone. So you don't necessarily have to remember what wine region you like the best because you can just go look up your wine history or your buying history, or maybe you have an account on Vivino or you've taken pictures of bottles. So it's more, I think, the integration of technology, and not that people know less or that wine drinkers know less, but that they have favorites, and they have ways of remembering the things that they like.
So much to say on this. I guess first for me, Kim, I was kind of discouraged for us being wine educators and doing all this to promote wine, and to see that trending, the knowledge in wine is going down. So they, like you said, they said the average consumer knows little less than they did 2 years ago. But they said those people that know less are spending more on wine. So they're still consuming wine. And this all goes back to the thing we say, try to learn about the wine that you're drinking. It just seems people don't want to learn about it, but they want to drink. So that's a good thing and a bad thing to me. And you mentioned about the young consumers outsourcing. And like you said, I also agree, the memory part, they're saying they're relying more on Googling, internet, and apps. It's also another sad thing because they're not relying on the restaurant or the shopkeepers to help them with their consumption. So they don't want to really hear what I have to say or you have to say about the wine as much as Googling something and then just going and buying it. That leads to the whole knowledge base going down.
Yeah.
Sad in a way.
And do you feel like you've seen that in your real world experiences, that people would rather walk around with their phone and look things up on their phones as opposed to ask you questions?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, really?
I've seen people holding the phone. I know they're using Vivino or something. They're looking up, checking maybe the ratings on it. And I'll ask them, are you using this or that? Oh, yeah. And do you need help? No help. Okay. So a lot of times it might just be to check price. You could be referencing if the price is in the correct range or not, which I understand. Another thing on this, Kim, they said they asked in the study, they asked consumers how many varietals, how many regions that we're aware of, and the types of wines that they're consuming.
I thought this was interesting.
Yeah, and it based on the UK, like you said, but they did compare the UK to the US, and they were saying the EU is more knowledgeable on regions, but the US was more aware of brands. And this hit right on the head where we went a few weeks ago talking about brand loyalty and sticking to a brand. So that actually made sense.
And I think that sometimes there is a fine line between regions and brand. And some countries do a little bit of a better job, I feel like, of having the public awareness of their wines, and people think about maybe a style of wine or a type of wine and don't necessarily have a particular producer in mind when they want to buy it, but they just know the type of wine. And the one that immediately comes to mind for me is always Chianti. It's like people might not realize that Chianti is a region or that Chianti is a particular blend of grapes, but they know they've had it before, or there's something in their memory or their heritage where it's important. And so they will therefore have that loyalty to that particular type of wine. And, I feel like there are a number of different wine styles out there that could almost be classified as brands. Prosecco is kind of another one. If people like Prosecco, they'll be buying Prosecco, and the actual brand maybe matters a little bit less than that, making sure that it says that on the label.
Yeah, the Chianti is a good example of drinkers not wanting to know more than Chianti. They don't want to know there's different levels of it. They don't want to know there's different blends of it. They don't even want to know what the grape is that's in Chianti. They think it's Chianti, right? So,
right.
I mean, that was a really good example. The article mentioned something, Kim, about consumer confidence in buying wine in the U.S. has also dropped, which we were kind of talking about trending. They mentioned something about, is it a good thing that people are buying wine but don't care about it? And to me, this is all good news for the big brands, because people are seeing the big brands, they're buying the big brands, and they don't want to look into what's really behind the brand. They don't care, but they're supporting it. This type of study is great for those 5 big corporations in the wine world, for them to keep pumping out wine to people.
Yeah. And I feel like it speaks to that issue of simplicity on a wine label. If you just have the producer, the grape variety, and maybe where it's from in, say, California, but simple. Really, if there's something on that label that is what the consumer is looking for, whether it's a brand or whether it's a grape variety or whether it's, Sonoma, and they know that they want something from Sonoma, or they want something from Willamette, Oregon. I feel like that will jump out at a consumer. Whereas the trend these days for fine wine producers is to go the opposite direction. And it's to put that more granular detail on the label, more about very specific appellations. And I don't think that, except for that very small minority of really geeky wine drinkers, people who it's their real passion, whether they're professionals or not, they're just really into that kind of detail and that kind of specificity when it comes to what they're drinking. I feel like for the vast number of wine drinkers out there, that all of that really special stuff will just get swept aside because it's too confusing. And if they don't recognize any of that info on that label, then they're not going to buy it. And I don't know if that's good or that's bad. I think it's good for the consumer who just wants something simple, but not necessarily good for those producers who are trying to produce the best of the best and something really unique from their site. It's really hard for those producers to grab the everyday wine drinker.
All what you just said, Kim, fell right into some of the numbers that they gave, saying only 10 to 12% of wine drinkers are knowledgeable. 80 to 90% are not seeking any wine knowledge. They're drinking wine, but they don't want to learn anything about it. They also said older consumers have more knowledge, but spend less.
Older consumers?
Yeah, older consumers have more knowledge, but they don't spend as much. So they're spending less on their wine.
See, I would think they would be the ones spending the money.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
If you're a retiree and maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you discovered that you like wine, and now you have hopefully
maybe that means the older consumers don't have as much knowledge, but they're spending more.
Or maybe
the
now
people
you're on a
that
fixed
have
income,
knowledge
so
are more watching their money. They know
Yeah.
the good deals.
Yeah.
Maybe that type of thing.
Mhm.
And they said the U.S. drinkers consume fewer than 6 different varietals, basically kind of only 6 styles maybe of wine.
And there's so
So-
much more out there. But again, it's like I guess for the number of consumers who really don't just want a pleasant something to drink, that it matters less that you're getting some variety, and it's more that you are comfortable with the choice that you've made, and that you have those favorites, and that's what you stick to.
And how do you look at this feedback as a wine educator, Kim? Does it get depressing that?
Listening,
Yeah.
because the pool is a lot smaller of wine drinkers, like translating wine drinkers into people who want to take wine classes. Like this article makes me feel like, oh, like maybe there are far fewer of those people than we thought, which is
or we have to
sad.
go to the UK
Yeah,
and teach somebody, right? Because they want to know more.
maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
You're listening to The Wonderful World of Wine, and we are your hosts, Mark and Kim. You can find more information about Mark on his website, franklinliquors.com, and more information about myself at commonwealthwineschool.com. And every week, you can find us on Franklin Radio, WFPR 102.9. Welcome back to The Wonderful World of Wine. Mark and I have been talking about some recent articles that focused both on American wine drinkers, but also wine drinkers in other English-speaking countries, and about sort of the lack of need for information, and that wine consumers generally have their favorites and maybe don't necessarily want any additional knowledge or information. And one of the articles that was very, very interesting and had some good key points was about wine rules and how people feel about wine rules. Like, do they even matter? Should we stick to them? Should we follow them, or should we just toss them out the window? And I thought the part of there was a couple of articles and also a news segment, and I the one that really had me chuckling was different places where people think it's appropriate to drink wine.
Yeah.
that one had a little had me chuckling.
Well, first, let's tell the listeners, Kim, they were saying Americans don't care about
Right.
the
So
wine
this one
rules,
was
right?
specifically for Americans.
Once again, it all comes back to us. We're not doing something right. And it was a study that the Woodbridge Wine Company surveyed 2,000 Americans 21 years and older. So it was done by a big corporation.
So first, I did want to bring up that in respect to making sure that when you are looking at scientific, quote unquote, scientific studies, look where the information is coming from. So this one was sponsored by a very big wine brand. So have that in the back of our minds.
And you mentioned you like the part where they say where people are enjoying wine. Let's start with that.
Some interesting places.
So what were some of the numbers, Kim? I saw 43% of the people say they enjoy wine in bed.
In bed. Yeah. The only time I think I've ever enjoyed wine in bed is when I'm on a Zoom call with my girlfriends and I happen to be sitting in bed and I have a glass of wine with me. Mine in there that I am guilty of is in the bathtub.
Yeah, that was another high number. So
I like that.
30% said they have wine in the bathtub.
But I think that speaks to people feel like wine is their relaxation. It's their special treat.
Yeah, that's a big trend on social media where you see people with the bubbles and they're holding a glass of wine.
I have no issue with people enjoying wine in their downtime, and maybe it's not the perfect setting for getting exactly every last aroma or flavor out of your wine, because I'm sure that, the smell of bubble bath is going to impact what you're smelling in your wine. But if you are including wine in that enjoyment of your life, I am all for it. I am there with both thumbs up.
And 42% said they enjoy wine on the beach.
On the beach. This is sort of a trending thing that we have been talking about for years, I feel like, with the conversation about alternative packaging. There's been all of this, chatter about, well, why put wine in cans? And one of the big things was portability. And you would put wine in a can and then you can bring it to the beach. It's nice that people have beaches that allow them to bring alcohol to, because I can't name any beaches I feel like I'm allowed to bring wine to, but it sure would be nice.
You brought the conversation exactly where I wanted to go, because we started off saying this was a study by a big wine company looking at some very unusual things, where drinking wine in bed, at the beach, at the bath. To me, it comes down to this seeking data to promote maybe their alternative packaging, the mini box wines or the canned wine, and showing these numbers to say, hey, our smaller package wines or box wines are great for the beach, or
Clever,
you can't spill them in the bed, or you can take them in the bath.
That was actually one of the things that occurred to me as soon as I saw who the group was who was doing this study. I'm like, there has
something
to be
behind it,
some sort of motive for, there's always a reason why wine companies or any companies with their marketing. It's like,
let's
why are you doing
more
this
on that
study?
too? Because they said 8 in 10 people now don't follow wine drinking etiquette, and only 1 in 4 believe the rules improve wine. So the wine experience. So to me, the corporation, their wines are probably not something 8 out of 10 people would even swirl, or when they're talking about drinking etiquette, I'm assuming it's the smelling, the swirling, the sipping, the tasting,
the things that go along with the
kind of the geeky part of experience of wine. And in these type of wines that Woodbridge is making, it's just a consumable. I mean, it's there to enjoy, right? It's a wine for drinking. So many people probably don't do that with these brands. It makes sense. The one that stood out to me again was the 43% put ice in their wine. What's the reason for that? Is it because their wines are horrible and they need to chill them so much that they don't want to taste anything but cold? I mean, why would they want to show that?
I don't know.
That was kind of interesting.
But I do believe that a certain number of wine drinkers do put ice cubes in their wine, but I don't necessarily know the reason.
That's a big percentage. 43%
I know for family members of mine who put ice cubes in their wine, their reasoning for doing it is because they like it really, really cold. But I don't know why they like it really, really cold. Do they like it really, really cold because
the wine,
like you just said, the flavors are not necessarily top quality? Or there was something that I had read, I forget when, about beverages and consumption, and that there are very few beverages that we drink at room temperature, except for wine. And that if people are casual wine drinkers and not necessarily that concerned with the aromas and the flavor profiles and like all those things, it's really a kind of a jolt to the system to have something closer to room temperature that you're drinking. We either drink things hot or we drink things cold. And I think that the temperature that we ordinarily suggest that people drink white wines at, is just a little too warm for a lot of people. We get ice water and we get really cold sodas and we get iced tea and we get lemonade. We don't have too much that is in that like 40 to 50 degree Fahrenheit range. It's more in those lower temperatures. So I thought that was an interesting take on it.
Definitely not caring about the wine rules for sure. And they said 42% fill their glass right to the top. So I'm sure the wine company loves that they're consuming a little bit more or pouring more than they should every time. So
but I think that one also speaks to, well, then you're not swirling your wine. Because if you filled your glass all the way up to the top, you can't swirl it because there's no room.
Thank you for joining us today on the Wonderful World of Wine. We are Kim and Mark. If you want more information about Kim, please go to her website at commonwealthwineschool.com. If you'd like more information about myself, please go to franklinliquors.com. And you can find us on Facebook at The Wonderful World of Wine. We'd like any questions or comments. Next, we want to continue with another recent study we saw, Kim, and it was 3/4 of people find rules of wine to be intimidating. Back to rules. And this was, again, a British drink business, which is a British publication, but they were following up on the Woodbridge article we just talked about.
Right. So like that article got some play.
Yeah, I mean, and it was trending a lot on other wine news publications, and everybody else had a different take on it. But this was the kind of the British take on it.
I feel like we're always surrounded by this idea of that wine is a little bit intimidating because there's so much complexity to it, and there's so much. I feel like people assume that there's all this ritual that goes with it, which on the one hand, I get it because there's special glassware and you need something special to open it. And there are rules about how long you should keep it. Do you age it? All of that baggage that wine has. So of course, people find it intimidating. And I feel like we spend our entire careers trying to make it accessible because there is so much of that stuff that goes along with wine. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to know or understand all that stuff in order to like it and drink it and appreciate it. So I think the fact that a large segment of the population is still feeling intimidated by wine, that's not surprising to me, but it's our job to try to make that a little easier for people.
So we mentioned earlier on that the Wine Searcher was a UK study, and it showed that the EU was more knowledgeable than the US. So do you think this drink business article was kind of showing the UK people that the US doesn't follow the rules or they can't handle the rules? Because I was kind of getting that feedback from
you getting that vibe from it?
Yeah,
it was like those Americans.
Yeah, and they didn't really hit on a lot of the detail of the Woodbridge study. It just said the Americans are intimidated by doing this, don't like doing this, and like they didn't understand why.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're looking at what we're drinking here or what's on our store shelves here compared to what's people are drinking over there and on their store shelves, there's probably more Bordeaux on a supermarket shelf over in the UK than there is in the US. So that type of drinker is a different type of drinker, different consumer of wine too.
But I think there's also the ability to get certain types of wines in Europe that we don't necessarily get here. Like, I don't think that we have a big market for inexpensive Bordeaux, going back to Bordeaux, since that was your example, but there is certainly much more of that available in France and in England. You know, people can get the equivalent of a $10 bottle of Bordeaux that maybe isn't available in the US market. Like, there are more of those everyday drinking wines that are European wines, as opposed to most of our everyday drinking wines here are wines from the United States or Australia, or, you know, some place that is producing wines that has more of that labeling that American consumers can understand.
I see that kind of another way, because there is a lot of inexpensive Bordeaux being imported here into the state of Massachusetts, for instance. But a lot of you can only find a selection of those in probably a smaller retailer. Then box stores probably have one or two SKUs or one or two of those items. They don't want to have 7 different ones. They just want to have a little selection of them. Okay. So I think there's a good chunk of them that come in, but it's harder to find at the bigger locations. That's the way I look at that type of product here in the United States, or even in Massachusetts.
So you're seeing it as more of a what's available because of how our retail is structured?
Yeah, because the bigger stores are more focusing on bigger brands, getting support by bigger brands. So they might only have room for 1 or 2 of those type of wines on their shelf. Smaller retailer might not focus much on the big brands. They focus on these smaller imports and might have 5 or 6 different selections of that type of Bordeaux. So a lot of the wholesalers, as you know, when you worked in with a wholesale, they have a huge amount of Bordeaux, you know, in that inexpensive Bordeaux's, and it's
but you're right, you know, getting the stores to bring those in and really focus on, hey, this is great value wine, and your customers will thank you for introducing them to it because they don't have to pay a crazy amount of money and still get something that's interesting, and it's grape varieties that they know and they like. Who doesn't want a bottle of Cabernet with their steak? So
and it goes all back to the knowledge base. So if people are not wanting to learn about wine or follow the rules of wine, they're not going to want to learn about what's in a Bordeaux or, like you said earlier, Chianti. Same with Bordeaux. They just don't want to spend the time. So as a retailer, why would you want to stock up on a lot of those wines?
Yeah. If it doesn't say Cabernet on the label or Merlot on the label, people will pass it right by. But that's exactly what's in the bottle.
So that kind of follows the whole trend of the knowledge and the intimidation thing, I feel.
You've been listening to The Wonderful World of Wine, and we are your hosts, Kim Simone and Mark Lindsay. You can find us on Facebook at The Wonderful World of Wine. We always love to hear your questions and comments. We might even answer them on the air. Join us every week on Franklin Radio 102.9 WFPR, and we'll see you again next week. Cheers. Bye.